The planning board meeting of July 16, 2025. Start with roll call. Ryan Balcom, not here. Jen Bluestein.
Here.
Alden Clark.
Here.
Charlie Palmisano is not here. Jamie Pennington.
Here.
Rick Tater. Here. Jack Becerra.
Here.
Matt Heffron.
Here.
And Lee. So we have, for the proponents later on, we have 5 full members here and our 2 associate members, so we have adequate numbers to go. Should we get to that point?
This is Heather Shan, Chair of the Planning and Development Committee. This is the joint hearing of the planning board tonight. President Councilor Harmon, we are a quorum of our committee. We're here to discuss 2 ordinances. Ordinance 204, which is a proposed zoning map change from Low Street, Colby Farm Lane, R1, R2. And ordinance 205, which is a proposal to change the zoning map at the corner of Lower Hill Street, industrial development.
Could you guys speak up?
Yep.
Maybe here.
The air conditioner is like blowing behind us.
Sorry, we'll try to project our voices better. Sorry.
So we'll open the public hearing and direct report. Sure. Summarize.
Sure, and I don't want to overstep for the sponsor. If the sponsor would like to speak to it, this is zoning map, 2 zoning map changes. I'm going to speak to just one initially. It's depicted on the map here. I have 2 different versions of this map. I tend to prefer the aerial photograph. I find it a little easier to orient oneself to it. So I'm not going to flip between these, but this is basically illustrating an area over on Low Street, just south of Low Street, where you see Colby Farm Lane. I'm just going to little hand tool. This is Colby Farm Lane right here. This is the recent development that's taking place there. This is a little bit older as a pair of photographs. We're not seeing some of the newer homes that are here. But it's to rezone these parcels right here, essentially upzoning it, as we call it, from R2, which is what's across the street here, and dragging that residential district R2 across the street to incorporate these lots here. It is, as you can see on this map here, the darker yellow is the R2. So in this case, it would be extending the R2 to incorporate these parcels here, where currently on this side of the street, it's R1. That is in summary, the nature of that zoning map change. I don't know if it's possible.
Jim Crowley, City Council of Ward 5. Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit of color here. We do know that it is upzoning from R2 to R1. And the reason is pretty straightforward and simple. Why I try to undertake this is these lots are kind of an island surrounded, an R1 island surrounded by R2 and surrounded by Con. There is going to be some development that's going to happen further down the street at Kmart area. And what we're looking for is to take some of these lots that are bigger and turn the leverage back to the homeowner, right? So if somebody lives in a big lot, wants to potentially split their lot and add another building or add a cul-de-sac or something like that, they should be able to do that. They should be able to do that while they control the property, not after they sell. The developer might come in and have the same kind of idea. So there is no plan for development right now for any of these lots, but simply being a bit proactive in these lots, allowing these folks in some of the bigger lots to have some flexibility and leverage as they maybe age in place, or maybe they have other plans going forward. And for those who have smaller lots along the way, if they'd like to make adjustments or any type of remodeling that they might want to do. R2 has a smaller lot requirement, and so while some of them may never be conforming lots, the non-conformity will be less going forward. And again, all we're trying to do is put the flexibility and leverage back into the homeowner's hands, as opposed to having them stuck with an island. If anyone has a question. Thank you.
Questions from the board? I'll open up public comment. If the proposal.
My name is Kendall Hatch. I live at 209 Close Street. So that's one of the homes that would be rezoned under this proposal. I want to start by saying that I don't see anything inherently wrong with the spirit of this proposal, especially if it might create more affordable housing options for folks in the city. We were lucky enough to buy our home right before the pandemic, and I know that if we were looking now, there's no way that we would be able to afford to move into the city of Newburyport. But two-family houses mean young families, more young families means children. And that's why I implore you to consider this proposal as well as any proposal that that has the potential to add density along Low Street through the lens of pedestrian and public safety. According to Mass DOT data, about 12,350 cars pass along the stretch of Low Street every day. And that's before, putting the forthcoming 40B and the rec center aside. That traffic volume is higher than Merrimack Street, higher than State Street, it's higher than the Route 1 bridge. It's really only surpassed by High Street and Story Ave. Yet, unlike every other one of those streets, Low Street, a main thoroughfare that is at the same time very residential, has sidewalks on only one side. And crucially, the side we're discussing, the increased density tonight, has no sidewalk. I have a 6-year-old son who just finished kindergarten at the Brez. During the school year, we walk together to school every morning. I live right where Avon comes down to Low, and so we only have to pop up 2 houses really to get to Murphy. But just that walk is, we're on the dirt shoulder. It's really narrow. We get to that crosswalk at Murphy, and we often have to wait for several cars to pass before anybody will stop. The only traffic calming device there is a sometimes battered stanchion that sits in the crosswalk that gets pulled when it's time for plowing. There is some signage further down, but we've had more close calls at that crosswalk than I care to count. That crosswalk is the closest one to the Bresnahan School on Low Street. It's about 550 feet from the end of that crosswalk to the door that my son walks into to start his day. And it's, for all intents and purposes, the only crosswalk that serves this entire portion of Low Street. Aside from, you have from Giuseppe's to Colby Farm, that's the only one. The fact that a crosswalk so close to a public school is so dangerous is unacceptable. The fact that that crosswalk leads to nothing but a narrow dirt shoulder on the south side of the road is ridiculous. And to add further density here without any pedestrian safety improvements would be irresponsible. I don't need to remind you that an elderly woman was hit by a car in the crosswalk near Giuseppe's in April. A woman died after being hit by a car in almost the same spot 2 years ago. Families in the Colby Farm have been pleading for safety improvements at their intersection on Low Street, and installing sidewalks on the south side and improving pedestrian safety at Murphy Ave could significantly alleviate some of these issues. I know that these issues are somewhat out of your purview, but I encourage you to consider them as you're considering this proposal. The city has a clear and immediate opportunity to improve pedestrian safety along a corridor that desperately needs it. I support this rezoning proposal in spirit, but I urge you before taking any steps to increase housing density to first prioritize and commit to these essential safety improvements. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
How you doing?
Eric O'Shea, so I live at 185 Low Street, so kind of the start of the proposal, so in the corner of Colby and Low Street. So we're right next to the Colby Farm development, and we are absolutely for the rezoning. And do recommend that we move forward with it. While I agree with our neighbor, the traffic is definitely an issue. I think that is definitely a separate issue. I know that there is a proposal for the Colby Farm intersection with North Atkinson to be redesigned and narrowed to try to slow some of the traffic, to try to have better crossings. That's absolutely imperative, but I don't think changing to R2 really is gonna, impact that in any fashion. I think that needs to be addressed regardless, especially with the potential for the Kmart expansion. We really are just looking as homeowners. One is we're pretty much on an island. We're next to an extremely dense neighborhood that's really changed the feel of our almost 300-year-old farmhouse. And so we really would like to be able to have a little bit more conforming location and lots to the surrounding neighborhoods. It doesn't really match. Plus, if you kind of look up Low Street and along Colby in the area, most of them are not conforming today. So most of us as residents are being forced to, conform to an R1 standard where, a lot of the other houses don't even currently conform to that. They're closer to an R2 or maybe even less than an R2. So we are definitely for moving and changing this from an R1 to an R2. Thank you.
That's Charles, 144 Little Street. I just had a quick clarifying question. Andy, if you could put the map back up. For the larger lots, the ones that sort of look like double lots compared to the ones in the far northwest. Am I correct in thinking that those are large enough to subdivide into 2 lots if this is R2? And if that's the case, we're talking potentially about 4 dwelling units in those spaces? You don't have to answer right now.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because I think generically speaking, I talked with the zoning administrator, because that's exactly sort of how we look at this, is what is likely to happen down the road, just on a quick, back of the napkin based on the current zoning. And that is, I think, essentially what we were expecting to maybe happen with these lots. What I was anticipating perhaps with these lots, depending on, what happens down the road with, R2 zoning, and then with the planning board, possibly is for folks to try to do like a common shared driveway accessing a lot at the back. There's sort of the courts and lanes, special permit, essentially to access it. It's something we've had in a couple other instances in the city. So that is something I anticipate on these large lots.
Thanks.
Hi, Lisa Medina Smith, 175 Astoria Avenue. So I echo the sentiments around making sure that we provide recommendations on where we need to provide safe connection paths for folks specifically on the south side of Low Street. But I had a broader question on kind of what the big picture is for zoning on Low Street in general. Today we have a pair of proposals. One is upzoning to R1, one is upzoning to R2. There's a broader plan to kind of in general in spirit go to R2 across the Low Street corridor. I want to understand a little bit more about why is one R1 and one is R2, and what is the broader plan around lane use on Low Street? Thank you.
I guess I should probably best speak to that. So I'm not, this is the zoning map of the entire city. So the section we're looking at here is just along Low Street. I'm just gonna handle that briefly. So we're seeing this section of Low Street. This is Colby Farm Lane up here. So that's where that's where the current proposal is that we're talking about. The other one we'll talk about next is down here. There's no current dialogue. There are, of course, various different opinions in the city, depending on who you talk to, lots of board committees. There's the city council and the planning board providing recommendations, but I'm not aware of any comprehensive effort or plan to rezone the corridor, so to speak, of this. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not logical to do so in, given instance, but there's nothing that's sort of comprehensively saying, let's rezone, Low Street in that way. If you will.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? We want to close public comment then and open discussion. Planning board, planning vote.
Thank you. I'm gonna pass the word by Counselor in case you have any background. So we know there's a traffic study going on around and a peer review of that going on around the Plaza Landings Kmart development. We know there's an effort around North Atkinson and Colby Farm Lane, that intersection, to make some significant safety improvements. Are you aware of any other city-driven efforts? Specifically, I'm curious about paving, streets and sidewalks plan around Low Street. Is there anything in the works or that you've been, in contact with DPS on around this issue that's been highlighted on the south side of the street?
Sure, I'll just speak from here if that's okay. I can usually project, right? So, there isn't a comprehensive plan, to look at Low Street. But there are subsections to talk about it. There was some study at the, Story Ave and Low Street intersection, to look at the volume. There was some study at the Route 1 and Low Street intersection going on. Remember, that's a lot of, industrial, it's an industrial gateway, for us into, some of our business park area as well. There was a traffic advisory, not really a study in front of the NOC going forward. There was a comprehensive study at Colby Farm, North Atkinson, and that's incorporated in the Safe Routes to School program that is moving forward rapidly going forward. We hope to get some movement on it. In terms of this particular area in general, the answer is no, and it's been an evolution over time. When Low Street was there, people like to park on Low Street and park similar to what we've done elsewhere in the city, Mosley Ave in particular as well, where people would not have to pull in their driveway, they could park on the side, et cetera, along the way. Well, as Low Street's become a little bit gentrified and volume of housing, there is a need on the south side for safety measures, sidewalks, et cetera, along the way. And the only way that we're gonna probably get that, right, because we still have a low volume of users down there. That's not to disparage any user down there, but in the scheme of things, there's a low volume, is if we get some development down there and we make it a precursor to getting a permit that, for example, they put in a sidewalk in front of their building and facility along their shared pathway, et cetera, along the way. And I think we can incrementally build a sidewalk along the way. Unless, of course, we can negotiate something better out of the proposals, not only the 40B proposal, but also the potential LICO going across the street along the way to extend that along the way. So I hope I answered it. It's nothing comprehensive. It isn't on the streets program radar, so to speak. They will do patches of them, right? Colby Farm area will be redone, resurfaced. Most likely in front of the NOC will be resurfaced. They keep resurfacing Hale Street, Toppins Lane, Low Street area because things keep happening there. So they keep resurfacing that particular area. But other than that, nothing else.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I will say that our role as the planning board tonight is to vote on a recommendation to city council. So that's what the planning board will be doing. I hear the concerns about traffic and pedestrians, and I couldn't agree with you more. That's something that needs to be on the city's radar as we go forward. But our approval tonight is just related to the zoning definition. So you have our informal support, but we can't include that as a condition on a recommendation tonight. So I would ask for a motion, a recommendation that we can make to the city council.
I'd like to make a motion to the planning board recommend favor of the program change.
Second.
Will be 5 of us voting on this and, just the full members. And since everybody's here, I'll just ask for a show of hands, all those in favor? Opposed? So vote.
So the next proposal is further down on Low Street, and this one, we have a similar style map to show that. This one here, we're seeing is Low Street right here. This right here is the Knock Mullen. This is the corner right here of Hale and Low Street, and so if I just flip to the aerial photograph, which I find a little bit easier to see where things are. These are the parcels that are in question right here. So these would essentially be rezoned from residential. This came in part from conversations with property owners at the corner here who've been interested in, the residential use of that property as it is today, but possibly redoing that. And it is in an industrial zone, so that's not a use that's allowed in the industrial zone. From a land use planning perspective, it seemed to make sense that we bring forward the idea of not encouraging in the future further industrial uses with truck traffic not coming out in this area, given that it's essentially residential in nature. And in general, the zoning map of the city, if I just pan out that quickly, what you'll see is that the business park is just a giant, almost a rectangle. It's not a perfect rectangle, but you can see it's a big sort of blockish area of the city, but it doesn't necessarily take into account sort of the land use patterns that we have, that we've seen pan out there today, and whether or not it would maybe make sense to change the future of those properties before they become full-blown industrial uses. So with that in mind, the proposal here is to change from the current industrial district, just these parcels here, the rest would still stay industrial, to R1. There has been some discussion, suggestion that possibly would make sense in a similar vein for this to become R2 as opposed to R1. But the proposal as sponsored is currently to R1. That's the gist of this one.
Any additional questions or comments from the board?
I would just like to say, I did bring up the issue of the R1 versus R2, right? And when you look at, again, the idea of looking at Low Street comprehensively, the whole Wildwood, Colton Drive area is all non-conforming. All those lots are non-conforming. That really should be R2 by itself, just to make the lots more non-conforming. I really feel like this is an area that we should be considering R2 rather than R1. It doesn't really make sense to me to be considering large lots in this area. That's just one. Another point is that if we're looking at a more residential redevelopment, Hale, we've just had a meeting not too long ago about the Hale Street bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and it turns out that the city can't complete them because of the environmental conditions and infrastructure conditions between, I think, as far as. And so this is another case that somebody in the audience said in the previous proposal that we should be, if any residential development does occur, we should be looking at making a continuous sidewalk on the southeast side of Hale Street, so that people can get, so that bicyclists particularly, but also pedestrians can get to the light. So that's, again, it's beyond what we're looking at here, just thinking in terms of comprehensive planning. We should be thinking about the pedestrian environment, especially the south side of Hale, and the south side, as we look at future developments. So, and I guess one more thing is that we've been incrementally rezoning the, we added recreation facilities and allowing different types of uses in here that aren't industrial uses. And we talked in the last few years about taking a comprehensive look at this and perhaps creating a new transitional district. So I think that we should move ahead with this, but we should not have this be kind of stuff. We should move forward with a larger vision of the whole south side of the street, moving on all the way to There's there's a lot of complications here in some of the existing zoning.
Any other questions?
Actually, can I ask a question, Andy? Is it possible, if the board, so, is it possible to make a recommendation to rezone to R2 rather than that beyond the scope?
No, I think it's reasonable because it's a map change, although it's been identified initially as an R1, I think it's reasonable within the scope of it to change it to R2, but they haven't re-advertised that.
Thank you.
I would,
It's up to the council, of course, what to do with the recommendation.
I would support the R2 designation as well. I think, given the current environment in Newburyport, whenever there's an opportunity to create smaller lot, smaller residential, higher density residential, I think that serves the broader interests of the community rather than large lot, bigger, single family houses. So I would support wholeheartedly the idea of R2 zoning rather than R1. With that, I guess we can open it up to public comment, if there are any comments. No comments, so we will close public comment.
Ready to give anyone else a chance.
Still open.
Oh, thank you. So Eric O'Shea again, 185 Willow Street. Just more of a question, would changing to R2 or R1 in that section affect at all? I think most of the parcels are two churches. Would that change anything for them at all, or is there now industrial zone?
Those are grandfathered uses, so to speak, so they're vested, you know, if the uses were, if somebody were to redevelop, sell off and redevelop the parcels in the future, I think that's what Rick was getting at earlier, is we would see the potential there of not only, you know, residential development there, but also potential to look at connectivity and walkability of the neighborhood configuration. There's a block set of some sort that's, you know, like the local way you saw Jason Europe. But it, you know, coherent way that creates a sidewalk connection out, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Jim Colley, 27 Starkville Drive, as a resident, I just want to, just bring to your attention, I'm in support of, trying to zone this particular area as well. But I just want to bring to your attention that, some of the things that I've seen as city councilor is that when we put industrial too close to residential, we have conflict. And so, we got lucky with, one Boston and three Boston Place, going forward. We'll probably get lucky again on the Route 1 development as that continues to build out. But, we have a resident who lives, who's a direct abutter to the, port rehab. And I think, over the last 5 years, there have been over 600 complaints, because of the, timing of a 24-hour facility versus, infringing on a residential area. Dumpsters get emptied, snow gets plowed at 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning, things like that. All things that are, against our rules and regulations, that we rectify going forward, but again, the number is close to 600 in terms of the complaints in the last few years, going forward, and they're all documented, listed, and we react to them all the time. I bring that up because, Port Rehab is a 24-hour facility right there across the bay. Going forward, there is a great buffer right now in terms of the property with the churches. Where the dotted lines are is considerable wetlands. As a matter of fact, I just had another conversation about segmentation on a pedestrian walkway for Hill Street. And this is waterway as far as is concerned. If you got down there during our heavy rainstorms or anything like that, this is where the road drains off to. We typically have 2 to 4 feet of water in that particular area. So I caution us, I'd be okay with R1 in particular, especially around the corner and around the side. And I do agree that we probably could get a contiguous sidewalk, let's say, to the intersection. But going around the corner and going down Hale Street, may be a folly, going forward. And if that ties us into R2, then I suggest that you stick with R1 going forward with that. But, you know, you do your recommendation the way you want to do it. I just, am sharing some information based upon, what it's like to kind of live in that particular area right now, given that it's, so close and directly butts, the industrial issues. Thank you.
Any other comments? Close the public comments then, and any further discussion from the board?
I would go along recommending the change to R2 as well for some of the reasons that you stated in some of our previous discussion.
So I'll entertain a motion, relative to a recommendation.
I would like to, what's somebody else can do it? I would like to recommend in favor of rezoning these parcels, and including a recommendation to consider rezoning to R2.
Second.
Again, show of hand, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Station. Committee, so committee meeting next Tuesday, we can continue the conversation there. Station. So that's it. Motion to committee meeting, both items.
Second. Aye.
I'm good with that. I think people were fine with it probably for a while because it's like this was still there, maybe it was worth well. That's about me, but. At a certain point, yeah.
Okay, we'll open our public hearings now. Item on the agenda is 49 to 57 Merrimack Street. This is continued from the 21st of May. Patients. I'm not sure who. Tonight. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Scott Brown, local architect, and here with me tonight is Nick Bracknell, our project coordinator and master table setter, and hopefully our applicant owner Renee Bernard will be with us sometime soon. So yes, last time we were before you was May 21st. We've got some feedback and some commentary from the board and the public. And since then, we've made a number of revisions and tweaks to the drawings, and I'll walk you folks through that, and then we'll be available for some questions. The next slide, please. So we made a number of tweaks to the drawings, like including the site plan, all of the elevations. We now are including a roof plan, kind of a mini materials board. I have some of those materials with me tonight in the event that any of the members want to sort of touch and feel some of that stuff that is. We've also included updates to some of the, perspective views and streetscapes that you have seen. Next slide, please. So first up, our site plans. We haven't made a lot of changes to the site plan. A lot of what we've done has been about coordination between, architectural, civil, and landscape. So if you can remember, we had some inconsistencies with the size of the canopy. So that's been cleaned up, with the architecturals and civil drawings. We had some inconsistencies with the bollard locations, so that's now being shown consistent with both civil and landscape. We also had a couple of inconsistencies with lighting and those, as well as street trees, and now those are consistent across the board. Next slide, please. So our front elevation in the lower left-hand corner, that's the elevation from the hearing in May. We've made a few tweaks to the front elevation. Just a reminder that lighting, we did provide a package showing the lighting fixtures. We haven't made any changes to the lighting in the front of the building, but we did make one change in the back, which I'll talk about in slides. We do have a sheet showing all the signage on the building. As a reminder, there haven't been any changes to that since the hearing in May. Entryways, we did present, we originally, when we first were before this board in the beginning of April, we were showing one main entrance to the building, and off that entrance were separate entrances to the commercial units on either side. And in May, we came to you with 3 sort of separate entrances. So, at this time, we're kind of rolling forward with the assumption that there'll be 2 commercial units on the first floor, and the entrances to those units will be to the left and right of the canopy. And so that center entrance is going to be for the residential units above. In May, our submission drawings did have these things that I call poster boxes at the far ends of the building. Couldn't quite describe to the board what those were, and there was some question as to whether or not they were compliant with the new zoning ordinance for signage. And so we've since decided it would be best to kind of remove those. So the elevation before you tonight has, showing those being removed. There was also discussion about the roof in May, and that it is perhaps not as clean as we were shown in our drawings. And in fact, that is true. So these drawings that have been submitted are now showing a number of roof appurtenances, including the elevator overrun, which we were missing from our original submission. So we're showing that there now, and also showing what the solar panels might look like. And just keep in mind, this is sort of a 2-dimensional elevation. So I think in reality, from this perspective, you're not going to really see any of that stuff. And I'll, explain that in some of our later perspective views. So we're showing a number of things up on the roof. One perhaps subtle, but what I consider sort of a big change, a big improvement in the building is on either ends of the building. Those are where our stair floors are. And we realized that we had a little bit of an abundance of extra space at the penthouse level. And on the either end, what we've done is we've pulled in the penthouse from, those side elevations. And you can sort of see the difference between the drawing in the lower left-hand corner and the larger drawing, which is for you this evening. Next slide, please. So side elevation, and this is the, the first elevation when you're going to begin to see some of the major changes that we've made to the back of the building. One of those major changes is a change in color, which I think has dramatically improved the appearance of the back of the building. So in this elevation, you're seeing at the top, those roof appurtenances, which I had just mentioned. We're also introducing a metal screen in the lower left-hand corner, kind of screen this side from the parking there. There is, a possibility that this may not be needed because we also have some landscaping located there as well, which will, provide some additional screening. One of the big changes too on the back of the building, we've gone from aluminum clad, round columns to now, masonry, square masonry columns, which will match the, brick on the front of the building. Also, like on the front elevations and side elevations, perhaps it's very subtle, made some changes in terms of material notes. We've been very, very specific about the type of glass that we're using. It was mentioned that, we're now, clearly showing that all of the glass, including the glass of the storefront, is intended to be clear glass. On our elevation sheet at the front of the building and on the lower right-hand corner, we have a bunch of additional sort of material specifications, including kind of outlining, some of the colors that we, plan to use here. Next slide, please. And, the back of the building. So, there's a lot of discussion about the back of the building at the last hearing. I think I might have heard over the course of 2 hearings, maybe the word ugly mentioned twice. And, we took that to heart, really made some, all of the calories that we've burned since May have really been spent on the back of the building. And I think we've really improved the appearance of it. So, the one major change, is the color. It was mentioned that, the back of the building ought to be kind of maybe, brick to match everything else that's around it. But brick is really not sort of like a really feasible option, on the back of the building. So we just decided that, perhaps the best thing to do is just simply change the color from what we're showing in the lower left-hand corner, gray, to something that sort of blends more with the adjacent buildings and what we're doing in front. And this is also kind of like the same treatment that the building on the corner of like Tidcombe and Pleasant. The back of that building has a couple of additions or bump outs, which are wood clad, that are also painted in a similar color to match the masonry. And I find that to be a little bit successful. And so we're sort of doing the same thing here. Except that there's more color. There's more here that is intended to sort of match the brick color. So color is one major change. We've changed up the window pattern. In the lower left-hand corner was a little relentless with kind of repetitive spacing. So we've mixed that up a little bit. I think that has been a major improvement. We'll also these sort of balcony areas, which really aren't balconies because they're only 18 inches deep. In our previous submission, there were Juliet balconies, so, not a place where anyone can really sit. And what we've done in all 3 of those areas, we've pushed that back from that facade 18 inches to kind of create a little bit of shadow line and to break up the length of the building. And, changes to the fenestration at the penthouse level, and again, in the upper left and right corner, we pulled those ends back in. That's where we had the additional space with those, stairs on either side of the building. And, lastly, at the bottom, again, we've eliminated those aluminum columns in lieu of kind of masonry piers, which I think is a nice change. And, we did have some inconsistencies in our lighting package and some missing information. The light fixture that is on the back of the building, which is a type 5 light fixture, is the one light fixture that we've swapped out since the submission in May. And what we've done across the building is we made sure that the color temperatures of all these lights are as close as possible, as close as we can get them, closer to sort of like the light of an incandescent bulb. And we also realized that the lighting underneath this parking area, which is in the ceiling, was a little brighter than we wanted. So we found a fixture which has a lot less lumens than the fixture in May. Next slide, please. So we're now including a roof plan with our submission package. So I think, we're still trying to wrap our head around these new energy codes here in Mass, and think, but not 100% sure that, solar is going to be a requirement. So we're now showing, where the solar panels are going to go, the elevator overrun, the roof hatch, And we're provided, at this time, it's a little early, so we don't quite know where all of these sort of like roof penetrations and vents might go. So in lieu of identifying those locations, we've provided a setback around the building to kind of tell the contractor that, they need to work within this sort of very defined area so that this stuff isn't visible. And also on this sheet, which has been cropped out here in the lower right-hand corner, provided a note as a reminder that there's going to be no mechanical heating and cooling equipment allowed on the roof without you, from this board. So that's a note that we provide for like this sheet. Next slide, please. So our materials board, so I think that this is on probably 1.2, our sheet showing the side elevations. It's the color that we're planning to paint the back of the building, our sample of our metal cladding that we're using for the penthouse, a sample of the cast stone, which we're using in a number of places, including lintels, sills, the base of the building, and also what we're proposing to use for the window color. Upper left-hand corner, this is an example of bollard, which we're planning for the front of the building. And also an example of the fence that we're now planning at the building. So if you can remember, there was a lot of discussion about the screening in the back of the building. As a reminder, we really don't have the opportunity due to lack of space to really do any sort of landscape screening back there. So in lieu of that, we are proposing sort of a fence that has more opacity than what we were planning to use before. If you can remember, we kind of had like a thin kind of iron looking fence, which was, something that we saw the building across the street, and so we've gone from that to, something with some more opacity here to provide some screening. And it's going to be a 4-foot high aluminum fence. So this is actually showing it in black. And I think that you're going to see in a few moments that we think it ought to be more gray. And because I think the black in the back of the building, this fence, given its sort of opacity, is really heavy-handed and ought to be a light color. Next slide, please. So just a recap of some of the things that, we presented in May. We've got 2 affordable units, one located on the second floor at the front, one located on the 3rd floor at the back. These are all about, these are both about 900 square feet. Next slide, please. Signage, I just mentioned signage, really no changes from our submission in May. And what we've done here is kind of outline where all the signage is going to go, how it's consistent with, what is allowed by the zoning ordinance. Next slide, please. So landscaping, again, really the only changes to this plan are about coordination between the, architectural, civil, and landscape drawings, just making sure that everything's consistent. Again, bollards, street trees, street lighting, those are all consistent. And also on this landscaping sheet on the upper right-hand corner, which has been, propped out here, we have an example of that fence that we're proposing back, which you had seen in the previous slide. Next slide, please. So across sections, not much has changed here other than just sort of updating this elevation with, the edits made between May and now. And just, subtle reminder of what this site looks like now and that we're hoping to improve this major way. Next slide, please. Site section through Titcomb Street, looking towards the east. And really no new information here, other than updates to our building beyond to match what, we submitted last week and, just a comparison in terms of what this looks like, today in terms of the street view. Next slide, please. And this is, again, another section from Titcomb Street. There are a couple of gray boxes on here. diagrams just sort of showing kind of what might, eventually happen on this site. We have an empty lot that's immediately behind the building. It is a lot that can be developed. So these dead boxes really showing kind of like what, is allowed for zoning a building that's 40 feet, high. And also in the lower left-hand corner, we're doing the same thing there, building that is 40 feet high. And the dotted box above that is, what would be allowed through special permit, from this board for additional height. You're allowed to go up to 47 feet, with the special permit. And that our building's at 46, but you're allowed to go 47. Next slide, please. So, kind of an aerial view, what this might look like from a property on Pleasant Street. You'll notice that the sign here, not the sign, but the fence in back has been swapped out to something with a little bit more opacity. Doesn't really quite render properly, but that is intended to be a great fence. You can just get a glimpse of like some of that stuff up on the roof, not really visible. And you can begin to see sort of what the elevator overrun, which is well beyond the face of that house, might look like, well beyond that base. And, so what we're not showing in this rendering, which you can see in the lower left-hand corner, there's a rather large, tree, between the dumpsters and our vantage point, which also provides a lot of screening here. Next slide, please. Just a view from Titcomb Street. Again, we'll swap up the fence, the back of the building's different, and that little gray box there is to try to, kind of maybe simulate what might eventually go there in terms of a building on that vacant lot. And from this vantage point, you actually don't see any of the stuff that is on, that we're showing on the roof plan, of our building. Next slide, please. And just to close it out, that rendering in our lower left-hand corner, that's the one thing that we haven't, updated since our original submission, haven't gotten around to it. So there's a number of things that have changed in that, but, we've done a lot of listening and a lot of calories really trying to sort of improve the back of the building. And I think a lot of the stuff made now has really improved this project. Certainly hope that, everyone will agree. So with that, providing that Nick doesn't have anything further to add, and back over to the board.
Any initial questions from the board?
We go back to slide 9.
You said slide
9.
It's slide 16. Slide 16. Okay, sorry.
Maybe it wasn't that. Get back on here. It's one that actually.
This one here.
Okay, the next one. So I'm thinking about this fence. So am I understanding that the fence is kind of continuous at the same elevation through those 4 jogs around the back of the parking lot there?
Yeah.
And
And there's an existing concrete retaining wall which separates, basically our property from city-owned property, which this fence, was going to partially sit on.
okay, so that was my next question, which was, looking at the site plan. One section is proposed metal fence, and then there's proposed metal panel fence, and then there's proposed guardrail with metal panel fence. So are there 2 sections that are sitting on concrete, and then another section that's sitting on a guard. There's one place where guardrail is offset the fence. There's another section where they seem to be top of each other. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I know that there's like, in the upper left-hand corner, it gets complicated. Because we're switching from one retaining wall to another. So I think that's perhaps the area that you're
But
talking
it will
about.
be-
It's a little it's a little messy, but the intention is to have that fence be all in the
So
same.
somebody seeing it from JC property, see a continuous fence.
Correct,
All
all
the
in
same.
the same.
And then one other thing you mentioned, in your presentation, that this is going to be, shows the 4 foot, about a 4 foot. I couldn't see any indication of the plans that specified the height of the fence. Is that, am I missing it somewhere?
It's because we're missing, so the intention is to be a 4 foot high fence.
Stipulate.
Which is, I think, really the highest fence, right, that we're allowed per zoning here.
I just
I
want
think
to make sure-
anything above 4 feet requires approval from this board.
Okay. I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
we know what we're. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one question. Relative to the photovoltaic panels on the roof.
Yep.
Seems like you're not entirely sure whether they will be there or not. It's depending on the energy code, or are you committed to installing them? Whether it's a.
Well, I think this building would be a perfect use for them. There's plenty of roof. I mean, I think that they should be up there.
It's just, it's a significant element to add to the presentation, so I'm just
Yeah.
curious as to whether. you're
Yeah,
committed
keep in
to
mind,
that.
these only sit off the roof 1 foot back. So they're fairly flat.
Understand.
And really the only view that we can sort of see them, which is an elevated view, is from that, sort of like what we're trying to do is simulate those decks from, it's going to be the butters on, on Pleasant Street.
And
But
I
again-
understand the view part of it. I guess my question is, are you including them only because you think the energy code might require them? Or are you including
Nope.
them because there's a commitment to energy?
Well, what we want to
efficiency?
do is we want to show the stuff that, I think is going to be up on the roof, the stuff that, that we might see.
So you
Does that
want
answer
to
your question?
consider the building with the photovoltaic panels.
Pardon me?
As we consider the building, that approval, you want us to consider it with the photovoltaic.
Correct, yes.
That's my question.
Can I clarify that?
Oh, yeah.
I think what Renee wants to do is have pre-approval for those solar panels, but they be optional if they aren't required. I'm not sure Renee wants to commit to putting them on the building, but if they are required by the code, they'll be on the building. If they're not, he wants them to be optional for him.
Yeah, I think we can open up the floor to public comment.
Hi, my name is Sarah Tappan and I'm nearby, I'm living Chickon Street. I appreciate the changes to the back. I think they're an improvement. Color being closer to brick is better than the gray. I still think actual brick would be better and more in keeping with the historic nature. And I heard the comment that it's not peaceful, and I haven't heard why. I think the color and cladding materials from the penthouse are a concern. And don't match the neighborhood. I have a question, I guess, about the height variance, because I haven't seen any justification for it in any of the documents. And my understanding is that, I'm reading various things that, the mass law says that you can't approve the variance unless there's some hardship that's being, met.
I could speak to that. Yeah, just to clarify, this isn't the variance that's being requested, it's only a special permit, which doesn't have the hardship requirement.
Okay,
It does require the discretionary review by the board, just to determine it's not a detriment to the neighborhood, but it's not, something that requires the hardship. Variance.
and then the rooftop elements that go above the height should have some kind of screening from what I read, and I don't see that. And then finally, in the parking area, the code said there should be 2 shade trees for every 10 parking spaces, and I don't see those. So those are the comments that I consider. Thank you.
Any other comment? Close public comment then, and, open it up for discussion. Members of the board.
I don't think it applies here. Yeah.
That's the, that, you know, site.
I think that's the site plan.
I'll check.
Um,
Any other questions or comments? Have a couple of questions. One more minor than others. Relative to the address of the building. And this is kind of minutiae, but my assumption is that, when this building is built, the address on the building will be 49 to 57 Merrimack Street, that you will pick a number and agree with the fire department as to what the address of the building is, and there will be one number related to that. So I understand why you're designating it the way you are right now, but I assume the reality is going forward that this building will have just one number. Relative to the front elevation and the address, you've got large, numbers and letters designating the address in actually two different locations, one at the top of the building and one at the marquee. And I wonder if you'd be willing to consider just one location that may be the marquee, but I wonder if you'd be willing to consider that, because I'm not sure why you needed it in two locations.
We're kind of thinking the Bernard building.
I think that there could be another
Been
name
just long enough.
for the top of the building, not the building address, so.
Yeah.
We'd like to-
Yeah, we agree. I think that's next.
Think about that.
Or the year he started planning it at the top.
Yeah.
So a couple of other items, in terms of the roof plan, I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think one of our conditions of approval will be that we are approving the building with what is shown on the roof plan right now. And some of that is covered by a note, and I'm fine with that. But we will limit it to what you're showing right now, and anything else that is proposed, you would have to come back for separate.
Yeah, you could.
if that's a modification of this part.
Couple of items that we have talked about several times, and maybe we're not communicating clearly on it, but I think given the request for a special permit for height relative to the building, I think you need to show a couple of three-dimensional diagrams, which I think we've talked about, and we can talk about further offline, but that indicate the difference between what is allowable by zoning right now, and what you are proposing. And I know you showed it in elevation, with the gray blocks that are on the elevation. I'm not sure that quite gets to the level of information we're looking for. I'm not gonna hold up any discussions about, motions tonight relative to that. But I would like to see more comprehensive diagrams that support your request for the height increase. And I don't think it's complicated. I think it's just showing more clearly, the level of information that you're talking terms of materials, we've talked about materials board. Seeing the actual materials, I appreciate the digital presentation, but, we need to see real materials, real colors, and I know you brought them with you, but you gotta put them in a materials board, and I know you know what that means. You're missing a couple of items relative to that. I think, although you've mentioned the window, you haven't really been specific about the storefront system. The aluminum storefront, I assume the color is the same as the windows, but you just need to say that. The guardrails, the painted decorative metal guardrails at balconies, you just need to be clear about what that paint color is again. And I'm not trying to be a pain in the neck about this, it's just the information that's required to document what you're proposing. And the fence, I think you've talked about in terms of the paint color, but if you could be specific about that as well. There's a couple of issues. There's been discussion about impacts to abutters. And Andy, I think you can speak to this in a little bit more detail, but we will make it a condition of approval that as part of your construction management plan, there is outreach to abutters. There is a survey of existing conditions. There is monitoring of vibration at your property line. And that any further mitigation or measures to be taken will be discussed between you and the individual property owners. We're not experts on what the requirements are for that, but we would like that discussion to take place. So we're asking you to reach out to abutters, to establish existing conditions and to monitor the vibration and impact structure at your property at a minimum. And hope that there are other discussions between the proponents and the abutters relative to anything additional. Like, so that's one thing. There's a clarification of the retail definition. We want to make sure that definition is broad enough that it encompasses everything that you might anticipate in terms of use of the ground floor. That's not limited to just the definition of retail.
If I could speak to that, but yeah, we just wanted to make sure, I think, and I believe it's in your own interest, I think it's what you've talked about with us, but you don't necessarily want to limit yourself to only what we consider retail space, right? It might be an office use, right? So where it's a mixed use building, I just want to make it clear that the written decision that we're not only approving retail or approving those uses as mixed use. However, of course, if it was a restaurant or something and it requires more parking, that's a different situation, requires more back, but or to parking, but otherwise, it's not limited to just the traditional sales.
I just want to get back to the landscaping question, please. So the ordinance, we don't normally deal with large parking lots, central businesses, so it's kind of an unusual situation. The ordinance does say that surface parking more than 20 spaces. At least one shade tree for 10 parking spaces. Each such tree is a minimum of 2.5 inches. Looking at the landscaping plan, I can see it's a European beach in the southeast corner of the site. And the trees have to be within 10 feet of the parking station. So that European beach would certainly fall. And then, but this is kind of an unusual situation where I guess it's questionable whether the redness under the building considered surface parking. It's kind of a a judgment call. So it might actually be what we would normally think of as surface parking, 14 parking spaces, rather than 25. Not to say it's just an unusual. We have one shade tree.
Yeah, there are other, there
For
are.
the surface berries, would you call surface berries a shade tree?
Those two are surface berries, the two that are on the right.
There's one on the right and on the left.
Looking at the two at the right, I can't see what they are, but there are two on the right, one in the corner next to the police station and one next to the 9 spaces.
The one next to the police station, the lower right is the, I believe that's here to the beach.
Okay, the one right there in the lower right is the beach. Okay, what's the one, there's a street tree there, there's a tree there, I don't know what it says. Yes,
Yeah, that's the European beach.
okay, so
And
there are two, in that bottom corner, there are two trees.
There's an AA and an FS.
Yeah.
I don't know whether, yeah, it's
So,
fine. I'm not trying to argue the point. I didn't know whether service berry would count as a shade tree. But if it does, then you've got 3 of them.
Well, I would say if it doesn't, we'll what's in there, it will, if that's something people are
So I
interested in.
guess, I mean, I'm also saying I'm not sure that they're all these parking spaces are service parking
Understood.
spaces. So I guess the question is, do we feel that this is good enough landscaping?
Yeah.
For the project?
My recollection was the last time this was a quick conversation about the landscaping, the trees here, and I think Nick was the one that we spoke to for the presentation, but because of the 3 trees that are planted here based on proportions, and plus we're talking about individual trees and whether that we consider them to be an issue, canopy versus the side. I mean, I think that was our understanding is that those 3 trees, 1, 2, 3, were satisfied that requirement.
So I think we're close. And the only other thing I would say is that the ordinance requires 2.5-inch caliper, and all of these are specified as 2 to 2.5. So
Yeah, perhaps the written decision, we can just make it explicit. 2.5 inch caliber.
2.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Do we need to notice in the that I think it was that decision, that there was a recommendation about, I think, about the licenses or whatever needed for the
Oh, yeah, there's a special condition about going to the city council.
and I was wondering whether that's also needed for the baller. Notice.
I don't think that we're gonna see an issue with the bollard there. I do think the canopy deserves that though. I don't, frankly, I don't think it's a problem and it can be beneficial clarity just to include both in the request. In the case of, for instance, there was a light fixture installed in, for 2-6 Fairfax or Market Street, right in the sidewalk, or as part of that sidewalk improvement there, that wasn't referred to in the easement that the city council granted there, but the roof overhang was obviously, something that was a concern. So I would not feel the need to incorporate that or include that in there. If council wants to see it, if you don't necessarily call it, but I think it's the overhang that's the real issue.
I guess my question would be, the street light is kind of becomes essentially the city's responsibility. Well, the city can be paying for it. Well, these aren't, they were originally,
Maybe.
They were originally, yeah, they were originally.
so they're just,
So they're not, yeah, and I think that would be an issue.
what's the purpose of all of it? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Provide some protection and better delineate the canopy.
Yeah, so it has to do with.
I take no
They
issue.
sit on-
I take no issue with it, so.
So, so the canopy now is consistently extending across.
No, it's pulled back, but it's still because it's going over the right of way. The suggestion would be treated the same we did in 2-6 Merrimack, Market Street, where the city council would need to approve it just because it's extended the structure.
Well, if I look at, landscape plan L20, which is dated
Oh, yeah.
July 9th. it looks like the canopy is going all the way to the curb.
Yeah. This is the most recent landscape plan that we have, is that, if I'm mistaken, this is actually still showing the old. We can put an explicit condition to make it clear. It's the other, I know the other drawing, you can do it.
Yeah, so the landscape plan doesn't match the civil
I
plan,
didn't think we were showing the canopy in the landscape plan.
and you're showing the bollards also,
Well, the
Just
wall
the
should be,
bollards, yeah.
but they're on the curb, that's what I'm saying, so.
Yeah, there's so much heavy line work.
I can certainly tell you, even absent the special condition, having talked about it internally, depending on this, well, which is like, we're very much agree with that this plan is going to take a year.
So which is gonna dictate?
This one here that shows that it has been in fact pulled back, so the civil, no, not civil, yes, not the landscape plan, which shows that he. I'm sorry, I'm showing. But it's the same on that drawing, it shows the correct back. So the one inconsistent drawing, if you want.
So, can we summarize conditions?
the canopy is not on the landscape.
I was thinking a second ago.
I guess what's happening is the brickwork.
Yeah.
Looks like.
It's not.
Oh, yeah, it looks like rectangle right now. I think it's the same place.
What I'd like to do is summarize conditions. Should we get to, so that you understand, context of moving forward. And what I have.
Yep.
I have the construction management plan, and pressing a button. I have roof plan. What's allowable up there to what's shown on the plan. With apologies, I have sufficient of structural materials for final review. Height and massing diagram to support the special permit. And
For a question on the materials board, given the visual submission here, and Scott mentioned he has a couple of samples here. Is that something that's submitted in return to the board for approval prior to, as a submission here prior to construction, or is it just be given that there's a representation of it here, is it just submission to the office as a
prior
record?
final submission of material board prior to construction or for review.
For review by the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the last one I have is the.
We also, we had, in addition to that, sorry, just a quick mention, we had the 2.5 inch caliber tree, right, you mentioned, just to make it clear, that's the threshold, clarification of 4 foot fence. Well, just to be clear. And, the, generic sort of special conditions that the office had recommended based on the nature of the project, which are pretty typical, but, replacing the existing sidewalk, this is sort of, typical sort of condition. Sidewalk and street trees, that's a standard that we've seen before, of course. As you mentioned earlier, the construction management plan, which is also going to address things like the sidewalk closures and continuity during construction, construction sequencing, dust control, hours of operation, control. Great. Yeah, and just, you, as you mentioned earlier, there's the condition that we put in staff. It clarifies where those, and then, prior to the, occupancy permit itself, at least to give a little more time during construction, but to deal with the easement going to the city council, for that component. So that's something that we did with usage, market treated and every year. We go to, ground for photo did you feel there was a special condition needed for that? Because it wasn't apparent to me, I guess, that it would be needed here only, and then I think it was the way we sort of discussed with the applicant, that the plans are allowing stock mandated and install it as the drawings are showing. So I think that's how we interpret the drawing test, is not a special condition unless there's a desire to have an issue. I don't-
Shouldn't we say something about it? I mean, we shouldn't say it one way or the other. We should either say these, we're requiring this, or we're acknowledging that these, we're improving this. It seems like it's otherwise there's some ambiguity in what they do.
It's perfect, if you feel the need to put it in there, I don't feel that's necessary here, only in the sense that, I don't think that they would be precluded from building their building without the solar panels, and precluded from being able to get their occupancy permit, for instance, in the plans, simply because they did not install the solar panels that show the drawing. So if you feel the need, if you want to put something in there to clarify, I think it's perfectly fine. I don't feel that that's necessary, because I don't think they'd be held up, but we wouldn't hold them in a violation of their plans because they didn't install solar.
I guess my concern is, fine, it's fine with the solar panels, but what if they, not saying they will, what if they didn't put something else?
Understood.
So I would like to say one way or the other, either we're allowing it or we're mandating it. I would say we would allow it. That's my- I think we should say that.
I just thought the last one that we had was just the ground floor windows having on. So.
Yes. One more. In terms of the sidewalk, there's an unusual situation in your plan where you're turning the bricks 90 degrees. That doesn't exist in that now.
That's right.
I think you
I
probably
think you
should
take
do that.
that out of the sidewalks, the way they should.
Yes.
I don't know where that came
Okay.
from. You brought it up.
It only came up because I thought it was a canopy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We were testing you.
So, I don't think we need to. say
If
something.
we feel the need, I don't first,
Okay, we'll
we can stipulate it just to be clear for all the same patterns. So-
Okay, that'd be great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got something.
Get 2.5 trees.
Andy, do we need to review the finding?
We should just note in the record, I think that you made the findings. I don't think we need to read verbatim, but I think that just note the substance. On the meeting, again, because there are several different permit making issues here, unfortunately. Just for the record.
Are we going to, it's a previous meeting, or sometime last year, we started a process. And for a complicated decision, having the decision. Are we going to do that, or we just?
Yeah, so generically speaking, when it's simple enough and it doesn't require that, I don't recommend adding that extra process to it. If there's language or more detail, I think it should certainly come back. I think in this case, it's clear enough what the conditions are. If there was a situation like that, I do think you'd want to perhaps have a decision back to you for review, but I think everything here is clear enough. I would need more people.
You'll have to look at it.
Right, yeah, so again, with the chair, we typically go through and we make sure that everything that's discussed in the meeting is conditions, some of our written verbatim the staff, but some of our here, but some of them is clear enough.
So, in terms of motion. Because we've got site plan approval, which is not a special permit. I'm gonna ask for the 5 full board members only to vote on that. We will ask for our associate members to vote on the special permit. And I see no reason, unless there's an objection, I see no reason to grouping all of the special permit this together under one motion.
That was going to be my question. To do them separately.
Much more efficient if you do them together. I think as long as it's just a note,
You know, unless there's a particular issue about one of them that someone feels we need to separate them, I think.
So I think we should go to the special permits first, and then we can go to the special second.
Okay. Well, I will entertain a motion relative to the special permit. That would be the downtown overlay district, special permit, mixed use, special permit for height, and the ITIF park.
I would move that we approve the DOD special permit for mixed use, special permit for height, and ITIF special permits in 449 to 57 Merrimack Street, with the incorporation of the draft findings and special conditions which we enumerated here. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Special permits are approved. Take a motion relative to site plan.
I move to approve the site plan review application, again incorporating the.
That wasn't.
All those in favor? Site plan. Approval. Still have a little work.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
I just want to thank everybody for running a really great process. I think the staff have been fantastic to work with, all of you. I think it's clear from the presentation and the thoughtful stipulations or special conditions you put on this project. It's really benefited. Having a really open, deliberative, collaborative process. We spent a lot of time working with staff, planning board members, abutters, listening to public comment, working with the historic commission, working with the board. I just want to say, I think you've done a really great job making this project better. This design has benefited tremendously from going through this process. We thought it was pretty good to begin with. It's a lot better. So, again, thanks again for everything you've done to make this a great project for hopefully downtown Newbury. Thank you.
I would reiterate and say all the same, but I would also thank the applicant and hope that the applicant moves on very quickly in helping this section of Merrimack Street to be completed, so to speak. So, thank you.
Yeah, I would reiterate that it's been a very, very good process. There's been a lot of dialogue back and forth. This is a terrific project for the city. I think we all want to see this go forward in the most positive way possible. So I think this has been great. So we got a little bit more work to do, but I think we're basically at the finish. Very much for your participation. Yeah. Well, the other item on our public hearing agenda is 190 High Street. And a request to withdraw a special permit.
Right, yeah, the request for special permit amendment, PDSP 2510, they've requested withdrawal of that application, so the board could, generally speaking, the board typically make a motion to accept the withdrawal of this.
And
Sorry.
and I done that.
I mean, typically speaking, we recommend members recuse themselves.
But I.
This is just withdrawal. Yeah, where it's not like being treated as a special, it's not an action to approve. So it's just. It's not approved, approving is what's requires you to have an extra. So the dark, you know.
We are voting.
You are voting, yeah, you are.
We need to replace Jens.
It would make sense.
So, yeah, you have seniority here. I need a motion to accept.
I'll move to withdraw the special permit amendment for 190 High Street without.
Should we make this contingent on, we do know that there's.
Yeah, actually, just to clarify, because we didn't see it uploaded when I was talking with the office staff there earlier today, we had assumed typically we see it as a left attachment at this point, so the drawing. It's the last attachment because it wasn't posted there. Just I think it's maybe worth noting for the record that that is based on our understanding of the office. We received a written request for the withdrawal. Unfortunately, it just wasn't uploaded for the board members to see this evening. So it's with that understanding that there was a written request for that withdrawal on file.
So if we could make, just amend the motion to say, based on.
Based upon the written request of the applicant. Yeah.
Yeah, just based on that. Written request from the.
Yeah, apologies that that didn't make its way up there when we last spoke earlier today. I didn't expect to be up there when I got here at some stage. So, not panic, we had a conversation, we did proceed, it just sort of didn't make it there.
So we're going to get uploaded at some point. And getting there.
I'm sorry.
We're get uploaded, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and actually, one of the things I check on tomorrow morning is just like, you know, where is it that it is, or some reason to dig it up, I'm sure it's just a rationale, so like. Well, it's there.
So can we amend the motion?
We just did.
So that is it.
So all those in favor?
Who seconded that? Sorry,
Any opposed?
who seconded it? I just don't know who seconded it, so I can write it. Thank you, Jeff.
That closes our public hearing. This evening, we'll move on to general business. Turnpike redevelopment. 166, 168, one minor modification.
You ready for me?
Ready?
Great. Thanks everyone for your time and serving on the board and all your hard work. My name is Alex Loth. I work with Newco Development. I'm the project manager of this project going forward. So we're here tonight to walk through the various changes that have happened to this project since it was approved some time ago. As we went through all of the required engineering work to fully flesh out and come to a set of construction drawings, be able to move forward on this project. There's always some changes here and there that come up. So we want to go through those and we'll get your approval tonight and answer any questions you have related to those changes. So I'm here tonight representing the developer. I also have with me Scott Cameron, principal of Warren Cameron Group, Dan Severs from the Warren Cameron Group, and Joe Lucacello from Halverson. Bob Euler, who's worked on this project along with Joe, was not able to be with us here tonight. I'm sure he's very sad about that. So thank you, Andy, for bringing this up.
Let me know if there's something different. There are a couple of attachments. I think I assume that this is maybe what you want to use. Let me know if there's.
Yeah, I sent over a PDF that had some pretty pictures and whatnot as well. I don't know if that's the very beginning of it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want these right?
No, if you can start at the beginning, that's fine. That's what you got at the beginning. Oh, well, you're missing a beautiful rendering, which is okay, because we're starting with a pretty.
That's quite right. Let me, so we have your landscape plans. We have the,
And this isn't Andy's fault. I did send this fairly late.
was it uploaded?
It's the thing I put into Dropbox because we go too big.
Oh, so maybe that got lost in the shop. So I'm not sure if it's, you're gonna pull that up right now. It might take a second to grab.
If it is possible, I hate to.
So is it
slow anything down.
something that then still needs to be uploaded to OpenGov then? Because it's not.
Right, it's not a moving out, unless people.
Just there, you know, for future suggestion, typically speaking, we recommend that those be, uploaded to the record. We have that part of it, when the board's making the vote. So that's what we want.
I appreciate that, and actually, the only, it's really just putting it in a different order, the only thing in there that's new is, I think, the pre-run. So we're not, that all of the documents are
same, and if it's gonna take too long, we can certainly.
I'm gonna make a note, though, in the future, we will not be doing that. Taking,
Understood.
we will not be doing it this way moving forward, because it's not a good way to run meetings, it's the way for things to be done on the last minute. Or if we do a little while of that.
Oh, I'm starting off on. Appreciate it. If I can start by talking about where some of the various changes came from, some of the things you'll see are typical construction changes as we get through details and whatnot. But there are some more substantive things as well. We met with the Parks Commission some time ago to look at some additional parking spaces. And so that's probably the biggest change that you're going to see to this site plan is as the owners of this site for years, the 166, 168 site, we know that people use the property. City Rail Trail. And that's fine, and we've been letting people do that for years. The Clipper City Rail Trail is great. It's a great amenity for our projects and for the entire city. And our initial plan that you all approved had a few parking spaces on our site to access that rail trail. And what we're doing now is, and it has been approved by the Parks Commission, is creating parking spaces on the rail trail land adjacent to our site, so that we're creating a lot more parking. And what that does is it's actually 17 parking spaces. And so that allows people who want to come and use the rail trail to have a place to park, to do that, to walk up and down, ride up and down. And we see people with strollers, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot more parking spaces for that rail trail. And then it also allows people to use the retail spaces there as well, that commercial building that we're creating, and hopefully really activates this whole plaza. Because that was one of the big ideas. Not only are we providing housing that's really needed, but we've got this great interconnection between creating here and the rail trail and the retail plaza there, so that people can really come up here and use this and continue to kind of invigorate this whole transcendent part of the city. So that's one of the changes you'll see. Andy, thank you very much. Sorry for delaying you guys. I really appreciate bringing it up because it helps my tiny little brain if it's in the.
Next time this happens, though, we'll have to have we're not gonna do this, you know.
Right, and if that were the case, I would certainly just call it the plans as uploaded to the documents, because this is the only thing you're seeing that's different. It's just, I love to start with a pretty picture because we had to do rendering of the development. So that was the previous image was looking at the development from up in the air, from the Parker Street side, and taking a look at that building's gonna look like. These are a couple of images just in case anyone isn't oriented to this development. These are actually from the initial submission that just orients you to where this is. You all live here, you're very familiar with the city, so I think you know where this site is, but it's 166, 168 Route 1. It's where the Haley's Ice Cream was and a commercial building as well. The Haley's Ice Cream site is now gone. The building is now gone. The other commercial building is still there. We can go to the next slide, please. And just zooming in, so you can see our site in red, and you can see where 1 and 3 Boston Way are on the other side of Parker Street. We can go to the next slide. And again, zooming in and then outlining the site, you can see the site there. And line along Route 1 there, you can go ahead. Existing buildings, you can go ahead, you've seen what that looks like, another image of it. This is the old site plan, very few changes, but just again, it shows you the building. I thought it was a good image, but it shows you the building within the context of the portions. You can go ahead. We can, yeah, we can skip these. So this is, and Scott will talk to you. Scott from the Warren Camera Group will talk through the specifics. So what I'll do is give you just a very quick outline of what we're going to talk about and turn it over to Scott and then over to the landscaping team. So we're going to go through the changes that were brought about by going through those parking spaces. On the Parks Commission land, there was actually a physical change to our, was driven by Mass DOT changing their ownership in Route 1. So there's a bit of information there. There's a couple small grading utility changes, some small hardscape and planting changes, and then I'll talk about architectural changes.
Let me know if you want this sheet, if you want to go.
Yeah, if you can go, if you're at the beginning of the civil plans, that's probably a good spot, and I'll let Scott take it from here. He can go through his pieces. He may want to be on a different piece of the civil plans.
Good evening. Travis back in Scott Cameron, Warren Cameron Group, 66 Center Street in Danvers, Massachusetts. Good to see everybody again. Andy, I could probably talk to the color plan that shows the whole site if you want to just keep that up.
It actually seems like the easier one to.
Yeah, my plans are very good to build from, but not so kind on the eyes and the leaves. So I'm gonna go through just kind of point by point, the civil engineering related aspects of this. Alex already covered kind of the points why. But I want to make sure you're aware of the changes that were made to the plans from what you approved previously. Starting with the Mass DOT, changes the project is gonna include a reconstruction in addition of a new sidewalk and kind of greenway along the front edge of the site. The initial plans had pieces of that sidewalk on the land and pieces of the sidewalk on the Mass DOT layout. Mass DOT, would like all the sidewalk on their layout, so as part of the permitting process for Mass DOT, they did a taking actually of the land. And that changed the configuration of that frontage line. A little less land, it doesn't impact the density or any of the zoning calculations, which we made sure to check before that went through. But that did impact the frontage of the site a little bit. The prior design, while we're here and zoomed in, there, yeah, let's go. On the very northerly end of the parking, we used to have a transformer location at that spot. Now that we're through more of a detailed electrical design, that transformer's been relocated to the south end of the building, kind of tucked up in an area where it's kind of out of the way. We can screen it and make it out of the way. This would be the plan, right? So the transformer was relocated. This has to do with the length between the power supply and the transformer. We couldn't bring the power all the way to that end of the site, so it had to be closer to Parker Street. As part of this too, we're also eliminating some of the utility poles. There's an agreement in place to remove some of the utility poles along Route 1 on the front of the building, because those poles at this point in time only provide power to the property across the street. So they're gonna maintain that, but they're gonna drop that underground along the front of the site and then come back over on a pole and go back out. So in front of the building, those poles are going to disappear. We did do quite a bit of utility work. That's where most of my world exists. We're doing construction documents. I don't know if you recall, but Minko, through the development of 1 and 3 Boston Way, already reconstructed a large portion of the municipal drainage system that feeds kind of this whole neighborhood down through Boston Way and out to the wetland system downstream of this little river. This project was going to be the final piece of that, which included in replacing a very, very old stone culvert, which was built when they built the original railroads. At this point in time, we have not had a lot of success in finding that and locating it. Newer technologies, we started this in 2013, way back in the day. We used a ground penetrating radar study, tied it into our survey, a lot of accuracy. We did actually find this culvert. We know exactly where it is. We also identified the location of all the other utilities on Park Street where this property will connect into. And that prompted us to be able to more finely engineer all the utility systems, your water, sewer, stormwater, and all that work is now on the plan. So that focus and review that on your behalf from the technical side. And we'll be sitting down with the city engineer, DPW, shortly to go through that as well. In the Noble parking area, that increased from 20 parking spaces to 36. There are 17 parking spaces located within the rail trail border, so it's on the rail trail land. We met with the Parks Commission. They did approve that unanimously in favor of that. Those spaces are all going to be public spaces in that area. And the expansion here is to really revitalize, to make this amenity building and that connection to the rail trail more vibrant. So it's not just a 3 or 4 month seasonal thing when people are walking the trail. We're hoping this allows people to come in year round, as we have a more vibrant business and use of that amenity building and more vibrant activation of rail trail in that corner. The Parks Commission was very important in the first step because they've tried to kind of maintain a lot of this work. So it was good to get their feedback and support for this. Obviously the private spaces as well. What this also does is we initially had public parking spaces on the south end of the site on Parker Street. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a logistical nightmare trying to direct people to Parker Street to access the rail trail to walk to the north end of the building into the amenity building. And through this change, we actually consolidated all the public parking at the north end, so that's where folks will go. And then the parking on the south side will be for the tenants only, so it clarifies that, so we're not dealing with parking enforcement issues on the private property. And folks will get to know where to go for the public parking. So along the frontage, the original design had a little bit more of a reverse curve driveway in 90-degree spaces. We kind of had spaces on one side and then we flipped them the other. It worked. You could get a fire apparatus in there, but it wasn't super efficient because you have cars backing out. You get a very long stretch of road, and there wasn't a whole lot of room for landscaping. So what we did is we consolidated the footprint of pavement, switched this to parallel parking spaces. And we also redid some of the parking kind of in and around the building, little adjustments, rearranged the solid waste dumpster area, more accessible for the pickup trucks. And we now have more of a parallel parking space, normalized streetscape coming in. We'll be able to get trees on either side. We did also include an island in the middle of that, so it breaks up the length of pavement. And that will be raised actually, so it's a little bit of a traffic calming measure as well. You can see where I put the cross hatching across that, so that's, we're gonna do a soft kind of like hump there to just deter people from speeding through our area. But we felt with the parallel cars on either side, it's gonna kind of self mitigate any speed through that stretch of driveway. And we think the aesthetic improvements, which Joe will talk about, are significant as well. In the garage, we don't show them on here, but there were 4 compact spaces in the garage. We increased those to standard size spaces. And overall, there's 2 additional private parking spaces, and then we're up to 17 public parking spaces from, I believe it was 4 from the original plan. So quite a big change in public benefit there. And I believe there will be reciprocal easements and things for that whole area.
If I could speak this, we had some dialogue about this, a little bit on, there's always situations that aren't accounted for by your perfect deals, regulations, and the typical situations you think of. And so this is an unusual situation which it actually benefits, all the rail trail and the activity we're trying to create, the application of true mixed use, which is something that's come up with the 4-yard district already, trying to make sure that we do have true, mixed use and truly vibrant uses. So for Mingo to be able to make a good viable use of that space, part of that, destination using the rail trail, seem to be sort of beneficial across the board here. Obviously, as Scott mentioned, this is not private. These spaces are not being created, for this commercial use. They're being generated for the general public, but they will also have an ancillary benefit of being close proximity and obviously utilized by folks who are coming there, to go to that location. But to Scott's point, we can discuss because of course they're built on fees, but there's no way to get to them without going across the property. That the applicant will provide a reciprocal easement to the cities or the residents who never able to go to those spaces that are being created on public land. Those are public, obviously they utilize, by the parking there, but to make sure that there's an actual right ability to get to those spaces. So that's kind of the dialogue we have, coordinating and resolving this parking situation here.
Just for clarification, so the spaces that are on the city property, public spaces, in the same lot as the spaces that are not on the city property.
Yeah.
How is that going to be managed? How are you, for example, prevent people who are living in the building spending all their time parked in the rail trails?
Alice can certainly speak to that too if I don't get this right, but the good thing about this is they already have experience managing this at the train station at 103 Boston Way, where they're continuously dealing with people trying to park there and then use the train station or use the rail trail. This combination of parking spaces being assigned, so they're numbered, signage, and then where necessary enforcement. Which
But the private spaces are really ancillary to your small building.
Yeah, we're hoping they're filled by, during the day, it's business hours, they're used by patrons of the tenant there. The resident parking.
Meeting, and I think the understanding there was that because the Parks Commission controls plan here, essentially, the sign is going to indicate a short-term time frame for those parking there. I think again, we sort of leave the Park Commission, there's going to be some maybe nuance that might adjust over time, but they were going to put a restriction there that would preclude folks from trying to park around.
So the parking enforcement officer should be hitting everything.
Well, again, it's a valid question, so I mean, I think the practicality is we're assuming here that the landowner who's operating there on a regular basis is going to be keeping an eye on those, but it's a valid question, and, there could be a discussion at some point of which, does the parking clerk, take it down there, what's allowed on the vehicle and check it out and see what's going on there. It's a practical question, but I think that was just sort of.
Definitely a little period as it comes online and start to use it over the first year or so. Stick or towing last time they do it. And being one who regularly gets tickets for parking spot. On site design. So I think, for the rest of this, we did update all the stormwater management. There were some changes in where we're putting the previous area. For the most part, it's pretty darn close to what you originally approved. Stormwater systems are pretty darn close to what you originally approved. Wilkerson did review all that and signed off on it. He did ask that we, what you will see is a full plan set. We only gave you the pieces that showed what was changing. We're gonna have a full building permit plan set. We're happy to provide the board, the planning department, for copy of that, so everything's together. And I can either turn this over to Joe on landscaping, or if you have any questions regarding the civil engineering aspect of it. Oh, the one big one, not so big, but we did raise the elevation of the building by 12 inches. From a zoning calculation, we did not change the height because it's measured from the finished grade. But what this did is and I don't think, honestly, you're gonna notice much of a change from any viewport around the property. But what this did allow us to do was to balance a little bit better. We're still gonna have an export of soil from this project, because we're excavating the basement and there's really nowhere else to put it because we're matching grade at all sides. But we were able to reduce the export by about a third, which is significant. So that's less trucks leaving the site, it's less soil we have to find a home for at another location. And obviously the less we can impact soil and that nuisance, it shortens the time of construction. We just felt it was the appropriate thing to do. The trade-off for that was we do have some longer walkways in getting to and from the building, because we had to maintain our slopes for the sidewalks. And sorry, I keep looking this way because you're more in front of me, but I'm not even wearing this.
I appreciate the attention.
The young engineer who gets across from me in team meetings is always the one I pick. Right there. So we don't. The 12 inches, it helps a little bit with the gravity utilities going up Park Street. We do have a long run, we're pushing our minimum slope straw pipes. We get a little bit of slope on the pipes. It just lets everything breathe a little bit easier from a lot of different aspects. And, while you will definitely see some differences on here, I didn't feel making this recommendation, pushing for this, made a substantial change from the spirit and intent of the original design. But I certainly appreciate any feedback you do have on that. But I think that's what I have.
I just had a question about the historical aspect. Where is that ancient culvert on the property? Just out of curiosity.
If you pull up the utility plan, so you'll find these in pretty much all the railways. We're doing another project with Minco in Andover, because a railroad, and we're connecting to the same situation. It's the same. They used to build them in fieldstone, but they're just loose laid, like a wall, about yay thick with loose stone. And then there's granite slabs across, granite curbs that they placed across. This was the standard of construction back in the day. It was very simple. Obviously, they're still there.
I'm trying to figure it.
Probably have them somewhere, but it goes, if you're standing at the site driveway on Park Street, if you look to your left, there's a hole, drops down. If you go in there, good poison ivy and all sorts of stuff in there, you'll see the head wall from this culvert. We can't get into it because some of the stones have fallen out. You can't get camera equipment in, you can see, and I've crawled in enough to see like 10 or so feet in, I can see where it's going. But there it is, so, you can kind of see it, it's light gray, right there, yep, that's the one. And so it goes across the street, and then when they develop the MBTA lot or Parker Street, at some point in time, somebody stuck a 15-inch metal pipe on the end of it and called it a day. That went into the MBTA lot. From there, it hooked into a concrete pipe, and that took it around. We knew it discharged somewhere because the thing's draining. we couldn't find it, and when we were doing one Boston Way, we eventually found this thing out in the middle of a Phragmites swamp, nowhere near the site, and it was 15 inches of like organic Phragmites above this pipe. So we kept that there, it's still serving as an overflow, we kind of plugged it up, cleaned it out, but now everything runs through brand new, 36-inch corrugated plastic pipe, HDPE, and goes through a treatment system before it goes up the well. So we're managing all the water from the neighborhood. That was all in one Boston. You can see the manholes kind of going up, bottom up to the pipe. So all that stuff's in place. So we're gonna finish that. So it's a pretty big one. It's kind of a cool. If you guys want any stones from the old over.
Now, we can follow up on that.
Yeah.
So that culvert then picks up, that essentially is a stream. Right?
Yeah.
So what is happening to that stream? Sometimes it's a stream, sometimes it's just.
It runs right around, it goes right on the frontage up around Hill Street and then it goes underground again.
Oh, no, I'm thinking about the ditch that is between the rail trail.
Oh, so, the original design, we were filling all that in and leveling it, and there's going to be along that entire lot line, there's gonna be a perforated drainage pipe that's gonna function basically what that was doing. It's not receiving much runoff at all.
So you're like,
So we're leveling it up, making it more usable, and there's a French drain basically between the properties that goes all the way down. And there's little landscape yard drains along the way to pick up water, so.
fewer mosquitoes.
Few mosquitoes, it actually, it's not too bad in this stretch. Once you go a little further north, there are some depressions, there's some areas, across from, Dave Hall's project, so a lot over there, but. No, it'll be nice usable interface between the properties. Thank you.
Good evening, Joe Ficacciolo. I am Hobson Times Bond, landscape architect consultant project. And he is having a great day. So I'm going to start, I'll go through, again, some minor changes, a bit more reactions to some of the stuff that Scott mentioned. So I'll start kind of in the north parking lot there, because you're in there, and then we'll go counterclockwise. South and south, and then route one back to where we started. So north parking, since we last showed this to you, of course, this expanded a little bit. We're still preserving that nice bosque of existing trees up there, and moving the transport out, that situation. So between the rail trail and the extended parking, what we're showing there now is a nice planted buffer, shade trees, mid-story sort of service areas, and then brown plain plantings like hateberry and that sort of thing. And there is one of those if you want to go take 2 spots. Yes. This is zoom on a little bit. It's a view of what that will look like. A couple of years after sort of separates the rail trail from the proposed parking. Right next to, of course, the pine, of course, stays where it is. It's a view kind of walking down a little bit more adjacent to the. And then looking back towards the parking, and this is kind of that area that starts to fork up towards the two paths that go up to the retail plaza. Flush. Zoom back in there. And then moving along that rail trail edge there, some minor modification to that sitting area. I think it's a little nicer. Immediately adjacent to the rail trail line. And then, of course, those 2 paths leading up into the plaza area are still there. They haven't changed. What we did there was introduce some seating on the right leg going in, show that on the board, and then on the left leg, we have more bike parking there. And increase that. As we continue down the bike trail, the alchemical garden stays as is. We're touching that. And then that existing sort of half moon seat area remains as is. We're repaving it. And then there's that walk that leads up into the site towards the crosswalk that goes sort of around the roundabout there. We reconfigured that a little bit. We were showing that as a straight shot from that half moon. But given the increase of 12 inches, we needed to sort of get some extra run there. So there's that elevated slope to walk. With that little bit of an additional. Why that's been configured some. And then as we keep moving down the rail trail, we still have our level area for any exercise equipment that the city might put in the future. That's that sort of hatched area there. And then what's been added here is a pad. So that'll be leveled out, that pad there that we're seeing. And then at some point, city will come in, somebody will put that concrete in, and then that will be a bike share location for that. It's kind of a new element that wasn't originally shown. But this project is just rail and seated. And then on the south side of that rail trail, there's an addition of some planting there. Plants, I should say, opposite side project. Where we're infilling with some additional planting, as you know, just getting a little more of a screen on an edge. And I think that wasn't shown previously, but that's shown in this plan. Might be shown. And then Scott mentioned drive into the project. It's reconfigured somewhat. Some planting along that edge between the rail trail and that entry drive. Sort of reinforce a little bit with some planting. And then if we go up, started kind of the path that goes between the adjacent property on the plan. Yeah, there. Yep. That all remains the same as previously shown. There are some modifications we made because that's obviously where the transformer is going to be relocated. So, you know, we had to move some walls and seat areas around, but essentially all the elements that were there are still there. And then as we continue up towards Route 1, we still have circular space along Route 1. The only change there is that we reduced some of the stone walls that we had shown before. We still have walls. You can zoom in just a little bit. We still have those walls sort of defining that immediate space, but as we were looking at it, it felt kind of heavy with some of these other walls. We have these wing walls that ran more parallel to the walls. So we took those out. We think it kind of improved the openness of that a little bit, while still kind of providing some sense of enclosure on that space. Then if we continue on, Scott mentioned that got reconfigured a little bit. And so we responded to that with relocating the sidewalk, sort of changing that buffer between Route 1 and the sidewalk, so that the sidewalk was sort of outboard the property line. And then also the change upon that edge is because the building elevation came up, pitch floor elevation about 12 inches, we need to accommodate access in to those egress points. And so we added some blocks in there. Those are the reason why they're sort of not straight up, of course, it's because we wanted to have slopes blocks there, so we needed the run to do that. Bigger. And along that edge, we originally had fieldstone wall, sort of almost contiguous along the backside side. So given the changes of property and having those blocks in there, you know, we would have had to break up that wall too much. So we sort of removed that, scaled it back quite a bit. And that stone wall is now the vehicle exit at the corner from the retail space that's proposed. think I hit on most of the changes. Lighting has not changed, in terms of light schedule. Locations of lights were adjusted somewhat, but there's no major departure, from what we've been showing, again, from light fixtures, light schedule. To,
On the, just a quick question, it may not necessarily be landscape, but on the exit at this, on the Route 1 side in the center of the building that goes out, and those are steps down, there's a ramp on the sides, that's the configuration.
yeah, this,
Right, so those are steps down. Okay, I just wanted to confirm.
right. None of the walks along this edge are technical ramps. They're all slope walls.
Right.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Joe. So the only other thing of the landscape plan is in that corner. One of the previous plans did show that sidewalk crossing the exit to the parking lot and then continuing through that green space. Before my time, and I looked at it and said, this is a sidewalk to nowhere. Why are we building a sidewalk to nowhere? It doesn't, it's gonna drop someone off, you know, at the edge of the site where there isn't a sidewalk. So that piece of sidewalk is removed. I don't know if you're following what I was talking about. If you're following the sidewalk from kind of south to north, it now makes sense, wraps you back around to the amenity area and accessibility to the rail trail. And then the other thing to point out, just because the plan doesn't highlight it anymore, but the older plans did, is that connectivity from Hill Street across through the site and down through to the rail trail is still maintained. Joe kind of walked you through with that.
Can you say that again?
Thank you, Andy's highlighting it. So on the previous plan, we called it out. Pointed to the connectivity from Route 1 and Hill Street along through our site to the rail trail. It just isn't called out on this plan anymore, but that connectivity is exactly the same. It's still there. Just right.
So that was one of the questions. It was, in the previous plan, because you didn't control the site, that sidewalk really, really narrow. Now you're showing a full width side. I mean, the state is giving you more land. How are you getting that full width?
So we have an agreement with Mass DOT to work that sidewalk, create that sidewalk, and then it goes to them. I don't think the sidewalk would change. Do you recall?
If you look at your previous plan here, it's much narrower.
This year, you have permission to do a little more landscaping here on this property. Which is, I think, is that the landscaping you're referring to?
No,
Or is it
if you go to the second plan, you have both plans here?
Yeah.
That, see up there in the right-hand corner, it's a very narrow sidewalk.
Oh, but yeah,
And so you couldn't, you told us you couldn't do it.
Yeah, there's been.
yeah.
Thank you. I wasn't understanding your saying.
The issue there is the land's actually owned by Ashby Cross. So DOT has said it has to happen this way.
So you're gonna build it that way?
We're doing it that way, and the owners, the relationship between the two parties has been very good. Mr. Minicucci has been in direct correspondence with them. You can see with the limit of work is actually into their property. We're gonna be doing landscaping and kind of blending it into their property too.
So you have, it also exists on the site. Right?
Yep. Same.
So that's actually part of our approved plan. That's gonna be.
It wasn't, yeah, it wasn't before, but we're working to blend these together. There's a lot of overgrowth and it's kind of a gnarly, especially on the northerly side there. It's not the greatest shape. It's kind of a Norway maples, a lot of bittersweet vine. It's kind of tough. So
on the, not on the illustrated plan, but on the engineered landscape, plan, you're actually showing all those landscapes. It's actually part of it. I have, Mr. Chair. So on the south side of the railroad, you're showing a number of trees, but those are just illustrative. Those aren't things that you're proposing to do. Say between the brewery and the parking lot. Those are just showing all those trees here. That's not something you're doing. That's just showing.
Those are showing the existing trees, and then you do have included in your packet the full planting plans.
And so the connection from the path we were just looking at, that is essentially gonna be a public.
Yes.
Is there an easement, or is it, you're just saying we're gonna make?
We're allowing the public to go through. We haven't discussed an easement for that. I don't know if that's,
It's an important connection, so we hate to have it. Just to put that on the record.
it's something we can continue to discuss with the city, because we'll have to go through the discussions to iron out the issues around, not issues, but the reciprocal easement, so we can build the parking spaces, maintain them, the city has access to it, et cetera.
And just for clarification, the heavy dash line is essentially a limit of work. The light dash line is your property line.
I think that's right. So the red dashed line
It's both the-
versus the black.
It's a double short, long.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, and I think it's a fantastic example of the kind of partnership that this project is an example of between the city, ourselves, other property owners to be able to make this happen. And we're just really excited that it's worked out. We're able to improve the rail trail, improve the neighborhood, and build this development. It's great.
And just so you know, the bike share station pad was excavated on Monday. And it will be poured as soon as we get cool.
I'm your head.
Yeah. Next video.
We're actually looking at an e-bike sharing program over on our property.
With Metro Mobility?
Yes.
Second to be here.
I can talk to you offline and show it to you, but somewhere on the 3 Boston Way site, very close to the train station. Yeah, we're trying to get as close to the train as we can. Any questions on landscaping or civil? We can always jump back to it. I have a couple of architectural things to go through.
I do have one question. I was not on the board when this was permitted, so I'll be deferring a lot to intent and minor modifications. But if I had been on the board at the time, the only thing that would have jumped out to me is the location, and not suggesting you should change it because it's too far down the road for that. But people whip around the corner of Hill Street, so just to the right of your plan, to the right off that sheet, Hill Street comes down, and there is no stop sign at that hard right turn, and people whip through there.
There are some improvements.
So that's my question.
There are some improvements associated with the project that are already incorporated, but aren't being discussed tonight at all.
We didn't change, yeah.
Yeah.
There's this whole plan on file, and your wizard planning director will probably pull it up before.
You're spot on. This issue was discussed during the initial permitting, and I don't have it immediately available. It'll take me a second to dig up, but there's a plan that shows the improvements required at that intersection.
Also, so it's off-site mitigation. It's part of this project.
Yeah.
It's the same location you're talking.
I think it's a patterned,
The long radius on that turn is to accommodate trucks that come into the industrial, the business park.
Yeah. Which allows people to go.
So we couldn't shorten the turn and make it more of a 90, so we have a rumble strip and the striping and signage to kind of deter the regular passenger cars from whipping around that corner. Yes.
And that's what goes away as a condition from this. This is not tweaking any of that.
Very good.
And actually, but
I'm actually relieved that I didn't know that was in front, because that's amazing when it happens.
I can't remember whether there was anything done as part of the advance warning for the. Was there something that was?
I cannot recall.
I remember that was an issue.
They're already really good. The process system there was very advanced when it was put in. It detects people walking there, it flashes signage. We did widen the sidewalk to 8 feet, and that connected to the city project that takes it out to Route 1. So like the whole corner was enough. There were a lot of sightline issues there before.
And maybe just tightening up that curve from Hill Street, remove some of the concern about the car speed. Running up on the.
It's also a line right now. You can't see it because of all the overgrowth in that corner. So that's all going to be cut back. So there's going to be a lot more visibility.
Can't recall whether it's additional.
We talked about it.
I think the outcome was the radius from 1 Boston Way was tightened up. It's a really aggressive, so you can't turn fast. You have to take your time.
I was thinking more from the Hill Street side. Exactly what Jamie was talking about.
Yeah.
Making that right turn from Hill Street, like partnership. If you slow down those cars, then it gives it more time.
Right.
That degree of instant gratification is very rare. It's awesome.
Sure, it wasn't instant at the time.
Well, I'm new to this, so it was for me. Since the,
As we went through the architecture plans, and we can of course jump back to site as well and tell me how interested you are in this, but we made a couple of changes to the interior of the building. We had some sort of conference room spaces we didn't think really get used at our other projects on the third and fourth floor, so we incorporated those into the adjacent unit and made more 3-bedroom units. So we have 2 more 3-bedroom units than we had before. That's a new part. We also, throughout this process, looked really closely at this entire building, this entire project in light of the economic realities that we're in right now in terms of interest rates, construction costs, etc. And so some of the changes you've heard tonight, most of them we think are making this project better. But some of them are also looking at how can we make this project the best way it can possibly be, but actually get it in the ground. And so one of the changes we're making to simplify the building is we had a green roof on the garage ramp. So there's a ramp that goes down into the garage from the parking area. And that was just proving to be a whole ton of money that we didn't think was worth the bang for the buck. It doesn't change the drainage calculations or anything like that. But that green roof we removed from. We had some steel balconies on there. And what we've done in here as well, we're proposing is to change the balconies that we have. We had both Juliet balconies. We had steel actual balconies that stuck out, I don't know the exact dimension, a couple of feet, and we're changing them all to Juliet. It's a simpler design, it achieves the same look. In terms of how residents use them, we find we get a huge benefit from balconies, and it does save some significant money while keeping the same look of that. Talking about. And then just the commercial building was a brick building, looking at doing it with some of the same metal panel that the building has rather than the brick. I think those are the major architectural changes that we're making.
What is the roof of the ramp then?
So the roof will be a metal roof and it'll actually match what was going on in the commercial. And it's still, as it was before, there's a decorative and functional fence that keeps people from accessing the sloped surface, just like it was when it was a green roof. Exactly, because it dives down into the ground, so it needs to be protected from people.
The rendering should.
Yes, this is.
Yeah.
oh,
The 3D. But we could start
yeah, so. Problem is when I run these Zoom meetings and I use the Adobe and like, it doesn't.
Oh, I paid him lots of money and it's. And it's me.
Oh, it is this last.
You're looking for the rendering off the Dropbox. And you can see it on the landscape drawings. I don't think it looks significantly different on the rendering. If you're in the Dropbox file, the rendering is the first and last image. That's the unit mix. Yep. We didn't change everything on this rendering, so I think some of the balconies are still on there. This is not a fully updated rendering, but it'll show you that garage roof. We're really excited to get this one going. It's been a long time on our end, and it was a very long time, a lot of work on your end back in the day, so we can't wait to make this part of the city look better, build this project, and get it done. I'm excited to start. I'm happy to answer any more questions, concerns you have about these proposed changes.
Yeah, just a comment, the 17 public spaces is awesome. That's great for the rail trail. That's a huge addition to the city and much needed in that area, which is limited for parking, public. Great.
Thank you. We think so too. We're really excited about it because we know people use it every day now. And so we're getting more of that, and it's better because right now it's, a little driveway. It's, I know we're the owner of the property, but it's not beautiful. So it'll be nice to have some good parking spaces there.
The Any thoughts about who occupies the amenity building?
Right, there have been conversations. It looks like it's leaning towards a local ice cream shop operator. I just don't know exactly. I don't think we've inked anything yet, so that's where we're leaning, and hopefully it will be beyond ice cream. New Englanders eat ice cream year round anyway, but hopefully it goes beyond ice cream to other things as well. That's our.
Okay,
Let's just ask a question procedurally. Do we need to deem this minor? Almost in addition to,
I think it's worth incorporating that in your motion, yeah, just, yeah, making it clear.
so that's removed.
move to deem this modification minor and to approve the request for the minor modification for the structure of this plan for 166, 168, Route 1.
Second,
Jack, again, we will ask you to go. Yeah, we have to wait. Five of us, all those in favor? Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Matt, we're going to clear that. Okay. I,
Yeah, if you don't mind being here for a few minutes. Yeah, quick synopsis. So it's been a little bit of a gap in time in between, when we last did this. But, quick synopsis, this, draft here is intended to incorporate the substantive comments. There was a lengthy dialogue that the planning board had with some of the, tweaks that we also got feedback from legal counsel about a few things and trying to incorporate the market with that. It was a sort of overlapping of a few things, but in essence, the bullet list here is intended to incorporate the substantive items of what the planning board had. There's a last note in number 9 of some things that are more housekeeping language changes, which are because there are other suggestions that were made by a few by staff, a few by legal counsel that aren't directly related or not coming directly from the planning board. Those are reflected in a markup version that's expected to be given to the planning and development committee of the city council along with the planning board report to review this regression to go together. And the idea there is that the city council, going to the planning and development committee meeting next week, can look at the changes that have been done since the original sponsored version of the amendment, and essentially for their sanity, try to just to clarify where some of the changes are coming from. This sort of indicate I'm happy to kind of go through it, but it's basically blue changes coming from the planning board, primarily the purple colored, on the side here. And that markup is coming from the legal counsel and the ones that are sort of just generically coming from the Office of Planning and Development and our dialogue are markup green. But I think the most important thing here is the written narrative of what the public called sons of things that should be changed. There was dialogue where a few things got questions that got answered or things that didn't result in changes, but I think this captures the things that were discussed and very clear best is the most discussion. But that's I think you want to discuss that whole list to see if that's comprehensive. If this is anything you're
I just remember this was a wonderful way to celebrate. Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you for this. I think it's good.
I didn't see any issues with them.
any questions or comments?
So, yes, question, number 5.
Yeah.
Have you come down on any decision about this? Because it said we should consider doing this.
Yeah, sorry, great, yeah, so in the markup version here, we had been talking with the sponsor, the version, the markup version incorporates this very specific, so there was an example, we had a couple of different ideas that were tossed out at the time, I mean, the thresholds here.
Yeah.
This one that's illustrated here is the one that's incorporated into the markup.
Okay.
So maximizing or allowing as the maximum size for one size 12 square feet, but total being 30 square feet. You can have a whole spectrum of debate about what the sizes are. I'm more partial to the side of reducing the size of square footage, but there's a whole balance of, freedom of speech and, having enough area to work with and so forth. So, for things like this, the whole spectrum side of it, we're discussing, what the David talked about the yard side. That's what we
So
came
that's
here.
the italicized things.
The italicized is what's in the market for the city council. I don't know what any of them would want to change from there, but the sponsor was good with that, as a sort of amending version of their. Legal counsel on that one can come back, and again, this was a variety of ideas, in this case, legal counsel coming back with some, suggested language and so forth. That with, they had thrown out 20 square feet, talking to the zoning administrator, we had, discussed with the sponsor that as well. So I think more consistent with that. So, yeah, it's a pleasure.
More sense. To make it a 3-12%.
I don't disagree, except that like, I'm so hesitant to the idea of increasing the signage size, that like, I'm okay with it, really, these, if somebody wants to propose here to make it 36 or.
What is the standard, what's the standard verbiage?
We've had people give different numbers, some councils have tossed out it's the 1824.
So 12 square feet. This is the sort of 4 feet.
Yeah. And we have a different level of how much water they're willing to accept and how much it goes necessary in the previous meeting with something else was about the request selection year. And you got so many different candidates for council as well as school committee and so forth. So it's also debate about how to decide and you did kind of expect this stuff.
So what do we do?
Well, if you want a motion to issue the advisory report to the city council from planning development.
Move to be.
Second.
Then voted. What's in favor? Those.
Have the approval of the minutes from 7-2, that should be quick.
He's already sent his comments.
Yeah, they were perfect.
They were perfect.
Yeah, right. No edits.
No comments on July 2nd.
No.
So we can move that. And you want to talk about correspondence?
Yeah, no, just briefly. You got, you may recall the zoning board of appeals obviously is handling the 45 square avenue project, but in terms of, you brought your comments, feedback from the planning board going into that project to the CBA, so you might take a look at the comments you're getting, you might get other comments, or you might see other CBA comments in their file. So again, correspondence you're getting in relation to something that you don't have to write.
Which Smith was that
Like I
from? From Owen or from? What?
Oh, it was Lisa.
Somebody here.
And on the flood walls project, I mean, there's that project, I don't, I think it's hard to remember at this point, like, who knows which project and everything. That project's been presented, it's flood walls, on the landward side, aside from the berm that's built with bike path to protect the treatment plan, and so there were a couple of comments and concerns from butters, just concerned about, what does that do, in terms of trapping water or blocking water or, pumping water and so forth. I think that it's been sufficiently, taken into account, but I think we'll understand why, how, sort of walk through the presentation and understand the plan of that, and it doesn't require some further discussion for a reason, but I'm satisfied with the plan with that. There was some concerns that we've heard from at least one of the others there about where they're putting the walls, is that perceived as somehow trapping water on adjacent properties? I don't think at the end of the day that that's actually how it works, what's happening there, partly because everything will be flooded at that point in there. And the berm itself is already acting sort of the outdoor wall there. But you have to kind of walk through how the piping connections are done and where the grade changes are, so they kind of understand, and this diagram here, but in the presentation of the water, the design team presented to the Conservation Commission, there's some good illustrations and color coding in there showing how the flooding is before and after. And as you can see, it's not really increasing any flooding on adjacent properties, it's just keeping it from getting into the treatment plant. It's such a huge, area affected by the river and the ocean at that point, that flooded that. And the way I see it is that if water were to be held out of the property by that wall, essentially, that becomes a thin sheet of water across the entire plane of surface of the river and the ocean. And so the idea that it's somehow trapping only in that little area of the adjacent property, that water isn't really an accurate characterization of what's happening, but you have to kind of walk through it and,
So that'll be at the west end of the thing, adjacent. To the
the concern we heard here on this point, I think, was mainly on the east side of the wind walls where the clarifiers are. And we're on the eastern side of the treatment plant. That was where we.
Bottom of Brownfield. I think it was kind of in the area, bottom of Brownfield.
Yeah, closer on that side, yeah.
It seems, because it seems fairly level along there where where it was raised for the rail trail, and it dips down at the American Yacht.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, this,
So.
Yeah, no, it's from the property owners on the east side, and we at least one that we had heard some concerns there. And again, I don't think it's actually something that's like a real issue at the end of the day. They do plans, and they also redirected some of the water piping around the treatment plant, the other side, essentially, the west side, in order to partly address mitigating that concern there. But at the end of the day, it's with east side of the river.
So it'd be coming back from the rail trail towards Water Street?
correct.
The walls would be, or the.
Yeah. the wall.
Yeah, and the presentation that was given to the Conservation Commission as part of their meeting last week. That presentation had a couple of color rendering, schematic rendering showing what that wall would look like, and it's essentially it moves from the American Yacht Club and becomes shorter as you reach, Water Street. Becomes like a seating wall, essentially, that way.
Right.
But we don't, this is really just for our information, it's not.
Yeah, there's nothing that's before you or something. I did have an intro updates, just briefly, if it's all right with you, and depending on the agenda, items, we can touch base with the chair, but the resiliency committee, and I think Rick was involved with some of this, but we had developed a resiliency checklist. Yeah, so this is just briefly on OpenGov. Wasting all your time, I'm just gonna say where it is if you want to take a look, but if you're on OpenGov, and so you're under the planning board, the conservation commission page, for instance, and you go with permit, you land on this page here, as the main page, you might go to conservation commission or planning board for the permit you need. But what we've done here is we've developed in the resiliency committee a draft checklist of questions that applicants can fill out in applying to these boards for permits that would help to focus on resiliency measures, try to get, examine a little bit more of the applicants what they're putting into their projects. And that's kind of thing that can be fleshed out. I mean, the main particulars would be, but the goal, the desire of the group was to try to have something that can be added to applications that allows both the applicants to, examine and be forced to sort of explore that a little bit further. How much are they looking at those techniques and tools as they do their projects, and also give something to the board to look at when talking with applicants. I think the natural outcome of that down the road might be some specific regulations that incorporate, standards that go beyond what we currently have in the books that might say you're, required to do X, Y, or Z. But I think that the idea here was a starting point for that. So, and the long story short is, at the end of that listing of different divisions where you apply for permits, we have a test portal. And so, Diane, who works in our office, and basically the back end, we work wordsmith and work through together different variations of this, but right now there's a draft application, sort of this component that people will be filling out, filling out the school, application, having one worksheet that's going to resiliency questions and sustainability type questions. And so the techniques that they're using, you kind of run through this example. So the question here, I guess, was like, it would be our review, whether we were trying to get feedback because part of this is determining whether boards will make this a requirement of the permit application. And that's not something the resiliency committee can decide. That's something the planning board can decide, the conservation commission can decide. or the city council, but something being zoning, we have to decide, and structure that like any other regulation or application process. So it seemed to make sense that we run through with the planning board, conservation commission, and these respective meetings coming up, at a time, the end of the agenda, run through the checklist, get, questions, proposed, or thoughts. So if you have time, you want to run through it, and you want to put together thoughts and questions, some of you might be involved already and might already have thoughts. Some of you, it may be fresh to you, but we'd be able to walk through, just kind of say, what is this going to do? The pros and cons, the benefits, weaknesses, where we think we can make tweaks, are we ready to roll it out, that kind of thing. Because it isn't something that the resiliency committee is an advisory board to do back, it's something that if we're going to roll out as a mandatory effort for applicant, if we think about what does that look like, what does it do, what are folks filling out, is it productive, and if so, how does it utilize the tool? So it seemed to make sense we have some review that and dialogue with the board, review the board. Ideally, it's one check. But trying to get some feedback that piece, see what makes sense at that point. Roll the others. Just further discussion. So if it works for the coordinator chair, trying to figure out which one it doesn't have a whole lot. Maybe like, it's not late at night. We run through that and just see what your thoughts are. If you have to cover it, do that.
How much this is ended. Might be interesting, might not be interesting, if you think about it, to show us how an applicant uses open. We see the end result,
Yes.
because what you're doing is
Yeah.
adding something, potentially adding something onto an application.
Yeah.
What's already in it.
That's a great point, actually, and it came up in our discussion too, was just even for board members, and for all of us, and we had to go through the application process, just to see what an applicant sees as they go through the process, right? So you click next, you have, let's say you create an account or have one, you're applying for a permit, just see what that application process looks like. So you see, step one, your basic info, step two, you're picking a property, so just see what that looks like for them, because there's a realistic implications for them and for you, what you're getting in the tail end, but also what they're going through. But one of the things that I saw tonight that concerns me, and I want to clean up as much as we can going forward, is like on a project like Minko's or like bigger projects, we have just a gazillion plans being added to the record. And it's very important for all of us at the end of the day to know which is the plan set that was approved. And unfortunately, when applicants start to mix and match which PDFs they're uploading different plan sets to, that creates a little bit of confusion. So one of the things as we talk to folks like Minko or any other projects like this, to try to make sure part of it's we can constrain on the open up system, and part of it's instructions to applicants or maybe a good process with them. But we're using all this weekend to keep it organized, but we can't keep the applicant from uploading the PDF that might. So try to make sure that people are organizing it properly, and we're not getting unnecessarily overloaded with a chaotic representation or application, set of materials, because some of these applications, have a ton of attachments to them, and it's supposed to be that a plan set replaces the previously submitted plan set. If they start adding something about a plan set further down, it starts creating a real trouble for people, including the staff, have to make decisions and cross-reference and your, things about making for a plan set. So it's a thing to be worked on, I think, a little bit only because the online tool doesn't allow us to automatically sort of bump out something that's probably have to deal with it as a government. So it's probably instructions to applicants, partly reinforcing with applicants, getting things on time and not getting last minute or confusing jumble.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When did the applicants start posting their own documents on OpenGov? Like,
when we rolled out OpenGov, maybe to this point, when we rolled out OpenGov, that was when they started uploading directly.
okay.
And then we sometimes supplement, like we had a public comment or comments from peer review. We'll be the ones sometimes uploading those documents, but for the most part, it's the applicant uploading their materials.
So that doesn't surprise me, because I think that's when I noticed that, like, the sequence of documents and files got noticeably more difficult to follow, because each applicant's kind of putting them up in a different order or something.
Yeah, we've talked, we constantly have this dialogue internally where we try to, we add a little note to an application process and we open up thing. We're always looking for, is there a tool we can prevent somebody from uploading this without doing this properly? Some tools are in the, against a vendor, so no matter which vendor you pick, there's always limitations. So sometimes we try to provide better instruction or something like that, but to me, this is definitely a work area for us applicants to make sure that there's no reason for them to upload a new site plan set as a further down attachment in the listing. It should be version 2 of the site plan set that was
Right.
uploaded, and it should be the same identical plan sheet so that we're not all shuffling around, right? But if they start messing around with that stuff, it becomes a big jumble, and we all have to sort out, all right, was that, this plan revised should be dated from this, and the longer the hearing process goes, the more plan sheets that people keep submitting. You know,
I would also add to that, the, inconsistent file naming.
Yeah.
yes.
And for the Merrimack Street project, this time there were 3 or 4 uploads.
Yeah.
They were compressed somehow, but they looked like the exact same file
Yes.
3 different times.
Yes.
And it may have been the file name was so long that it took out all the middle characters.
Yeah.
But I think if we had some way to force.
Yeah, we
the
can,
file name.
I think we talked about, one of the things we can do is we can give like a proper picture and like, you know, file naming, protocols and so forth. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, it's still a little bit of police to make sure that people actually follow through properly with that, because we'll see things and we'll have to reach out and say, you started to the record by actually, because people are always in such a hurry, right? So they're rushing something, they're trying to get it by the deadline, they're rushing, and then we're still trying to jumble, fix up the jumble at that point, and it might be a point where you as the board want to say to the applicant, look, we're not moving ahead with this hearing, and we might have to, we're not continuing or voting on this because we're gonna start up the record too.
Well, I think each engineering firm might have its own internal naming system, and
They do.
and there's no way to, I mean, it would almost seem if we had it may not be possible to do this, but if you had a drop down saying that if it's a site plan, civil plan, you choose this name.
Yeah, unfortunately, there isn't a tool with that, but that's one of the things, like, at least we can give instructions saying, like, when we submit site plans, name it this, And then, of course, if we've got appends to it, the date they uploaded or time, stamp, whatever.
I think the bigger, I mean, we can navigate it, it's tedious, but I think I've picked up on the public having this issue with like knowing what's the latest version.
What's the latest version?
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
like
hearing that more and more.
Yeah, I've noticed the big one that's really bothers me and concerns me, because we should not all have to wrestle now or anytime in the future, the zoning administrator, the building, anybody down the road even, to determine which is the plan set of record. And they just keep populating with new versions, and they don't care about the organization, they only care about getting in by the time frame of the meeting, and, we shuffle out and deal with the rest of it. We need to push back a little bit and try to make sure they do keep it organized, and every applicant's different.
It's harder with the revision. Like in Merrimack. So the initial submission. And then there was the July 9th revised submission of plans that didn't exactly track with all the documentation submitted. Then what we presented tonight was a different format. But kind of just talked about changes, and I mean, there are too many different formats and versions of things to really be able to follow through.
I agree. I also think there's a distinction between, everybody's got their different approach. Some applicants or, presenters we see on a routine basis, how they do it, but like having a gazillion different new versions and renderings of drawings are in the presentation, but are not actually record drawings. That also creates confusion. I know this discussion with Nick, for instance, because there's a lot of great illustrations to pick the project. But when there starts to be a jumble in there, that is confused with what's the record plan and what's the detail on it, and then there's an inconsistency with the canopy or some other thing, one drawing that, again, trying to, I appreciate the enthusiasm, trying to illustrate things in an efficient way for presentation, but I'd rather have a simplified, consistent set of plans as the base, and then only add to that what's necessary, so that it just doesn't create the confusion, which is part of that, just correct the change. Yeah,
Are you able to create folders where it's like there's official document submittal and then illustrated plans for presentation?
Without unpacking the whole software package, every vendor is different, like, there's no perfect software, frankly, I wish the government would, read all, like, develop their own software, not rely on private vendors, but there's no perfect way to deal with that. We can make the specific requirements for like what the PM is supposed to have, but we even have people, this doesn't have problem, that somebody's uploaded the wrong material to a PDF that's, site plan or narrative, or, some other thing to this board, but in a couple other instances, like, it's not even right document that's supposed to be there. And it's like, well, your application is incomplete until you correct that issue, but again, it all comes down to parts of what things we want.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Made a motion to.
Second.
And Matt, why did you vote on this? All those in favor?
I think that's just- I think that's just-